In this video I'm gonna talk about DaVinci Resolve 15, and it's live, so you can ask me anything. I'm gonna run through what I like and dislike about the whole thing. Who am I? My name is Jonny von Wallström and I'm a doc filmmaker. My last film, The Pearl of Africa, sold to Netflix. If you're interested in documentary filmmaking, subscribe. This channel is all about inspiring you to make your films. Now, let's start the show. Okay, so I don't know. How did that new intro look? I don't know. I just made it now, like half an hour ago. It took me like 15 minutes to make, so maybe it looks so-so. I just gotta see if I have audio. Looks like there's audio. Looks like everything is working. So today I'm gonna talk about DaVinci Resolve. 15 was released, but you can ask me anything. But it's just, I just wanted to run through the whole thing. I'm hearing myself here, so I get a little bit distracted. But it seems to work. Okay, so DaVinci Resolve 15, I've been using it since the first beta version. I really like Resolve. I went from Final Cut to, I guess I started in Premiere, I went to Final Cut, and then I went to Resolve for just color grading. And eventually, like, they released the whole editing panel and everything. And I've always used it because I've done like recuts while I did grading. But then eventually when it became like a whole NLE and everything, I was just like, okay, this is probably my program. And it's just because I just love the way that the color grading part of it works. It's like superior to anything else out there. There might be some like Hollywood things like the baseline and that sort of stuff that can compete, but if you compare it to any Adobe program or like anything else like Avid or whatever, not even close, not even close. So I really don't like the grading tools in those programs, but the whole thing with the editing is not so similar, or like it's similar, but it's a little bit different. It's not unlike any other NLE. It's pretty similar. But ask me anything. I'm just gonna go to some questions which I had before. But ask me anything about filmmaking or life or love or I don't know. Who knows? But let's just start to look a little bit in the program before I get into the questions. So, I mean, I chose it just because of the color grading, but it's today a tool where you have like anything from, basically you can do everything from start to finish. You can sound mix, you can do the whole edit in there, you can do all the media handling, you can do the color grade, and you can do the graphics and all the visual effects that you need, and you can deliver it. And you can do the DCP even. I did the DCP for The Pearl of Africa in Resolve with like an open source type of plugin and everything. And that worked perfectly in the cinemas in Toronto and like Amsterdam, wherever we've been. It looked so good. So I think that the tool is perfect for indie filmmakers. It's the reason why I love it so much is because you have one tool to do the job. I don't want 15 programs to do everything. I know After Effects, I know it in and out, I know it better than any other program outside of DaVinci Resolve, but I don't want to work with that program because it's so cumbersome to go from project to project or like from Premiere to there. That might be simple in like thought, but it takes time and it always screws up somewhere on the way, and yeah, I don't like it at all. But if you like Premiere, tell me what you love so much about it and I might change my mind, who knows. But I just like that there's one place to go. And if you just switch here so you can see, here's like the main UI. It's just like you get into a media browser, you have an edit panel, you have the visual effects panel, you have the color panel, you have the Fairlight panel, which is audio mixing, and then you have delivery. And like it's just going from one to the other and you have everything. That's what I like. But let me just get some questions here so we can get started. Here we go. I like the intro, it's awesome. Hey, thank you. I'm super excited just because it's so stressful to do this on like the whim of not probably being able to do this crap. Okay, what advice would you give somebody who wants to make a documentary? I mean, usually it's just about like going out and making it. That's the first step. I think that's the best advice like anybody can get. It's just like, don't take no for an answer and just go out and make it with whatever you have at the moment. You don't need to have the best gear. You just need to have a good story and take the time to make it good, because usually that's what like makes the biggest difference in the end. And I think a lot of people don't take the time. They stress about the whole thing, and like it just becomes crap in the end if you stress the production. Usually docs take so much time. It takes like at least 3 years to make, so don't stress that. That's the process. That's how it is for everyone. Okay, so let me just run through, because I was working on this template today just because I wanted to kind of update it for the new Resolve. And that gave me like an opportunity to kind of look at how I want it to be set up, because for editors or for like color grading, whatever it is, like the essential part of making it work is to do it in like the most speedy fashion that you can. And I think that you do that by being organized, and that's pretty boring. So that's why you need to automate it, because it's too boring to do it every time. So if I just switch over to the screen here, you can see here on the left side, this is like the edit NLE page. This is like a media pool, which is a browser. So I just took some time today to set the thing up, and basically I just have like a couple of folders here which has like the sequences or the timelines or whatever they're called in whatever program you come from. And then you have the media, which is just where I would keep all my media, and it's nicely color coded and all that as well. And what happens when you do that is that it also gets color coded when you drop it on the timeline. And then I have like one folder for music, and somehow there's some graphic stuff that has ended up in the music folder, which is kind of strange. But the good thing that I've done here is made some like smart bins which automatically are organized based on what I have as a preference. So if I, for instance, go into the graphics bin, these files are bins or files that are in a bin that's called GFX, which is like graphics, which I have. So I know that all these are graphics. So I can just like mark those and move them into graphics. And then they're hopefully not here anymore. Now you still have 2 that are in here, so I'll just move those. But that's how like I'm trying to automate this system. And then I have like archive, that's for archived stuff, and graphics, which is graphics, sound effects, and outputs, like the render stuff. And I just want to automate everything that I can, and I know that I won't do it otherwise. It's just going to become a total mess. And then down here is all my smart things. So if I go into like all media, I'll get all the media in the project. If I go into the timelines, I get the timelines. If I go into the SFX, I get all the sound effects. So then I have like these automated by just a search query, which usually is like, okay, what folder is it in, or what type of material is it? And then it's like just a speedy process to do it. You get all the music files. Now these are like the real bins, and these are automated. So you could just do these as well, but then everything would be in like one folder. And that would just be like messy. So that's how I organize my stuff, or try to keep as tidy as possible. So let me see if there's some more questions here. Let me see, Windows or Mac for DaVinci? I mean, I don't think it matters. I think you get more for the money if you choose PC, but I have a Mac, which is just because I'm used to that ecosystem, but I would easily switch to a PC if it was just about the power. Now Blackmagic recently, just a couple of weeks ago, released a eGPU, so you can use that with the Thunderbolt 3. Then it's a huge upgrade, and it would be possible for me to have my MacBook Pro, which I want because I want to have a mobile station, so I don't have like a big ass computer or anything. Where can I buy The Pearl of Africa? I don't want to subscribe to Netflix. That's the big question I asked my brother too, but I don't know if we're selling it. I'll email andre@roughstudios.com, and hopefully he gets the point. I don't know actually. It's on Netflix, and I don't know where you can buy it. I just know that there's screenings in some places like now and then. But I've moved on to the next thing, so I'm not so involved in the whole distribution phase of it. I know you probably don't ever use your phone to edit, but can you suggest me an editor that I could get for my mobile phone? I've tried it and I have never found one that I like, so I can't. Sorry. I can just say that it's takes too much time. It's not worth it. I like DaVinci and hit Film Express. Yeah. How often do you stage shots when you're filming a documentary? Do you ever get your subject to redo something? Not redo like in the sense of like, okay, now this just happened and I missed it, then it's just like my fault. But if it's something that's like, I reenact things if I think that I missed like a crucial point in a story. So in The Pearl of Africa, there's this scene where I wasn't there in Uganda while they were in hiding. They're in hiding in the film. I'm not going to spoil it, but they're in hiding. That scene was recreated just with them sitting in a sofa, just holding each other. That was a reenactment. So that type of thing I would direct to get the story across and get the emotional aspects of it across. But I wouldn't do it to get, the perfect shot or like the angle that I missed, that type of stuff. That's just like, it just destroys anything between you and the subject. At least that's what I feel. Let me see, I have some questions here as well. Let me just take another one while I look. Which editor is that? DaVinci Resolve. My favorite one. I've worked so much in both Final Cut 10 and in Premiere, and I just feel like DaVinci Resolve has taken the best part of all of them and put them into one package. Even a lot of the good stuff from Avid, I think that they've just like brought into it. And before it could be a little bit unstable, and it could be some issues with like the Fairlight panel, because you just introduced it and it was the first generation, so it was like crashing or it was missing functions. Now that one is like so spot on. It's the whole sound mixing tool. Editing panel has been like pretty flawless, I think, for the most part, if you have a beefy computer. If you don't have a beefy computer, then it can be an issue, but they have like ways of working around that I'm gonna talk about. But I just think that now it's super stable. Fusion I haven't played enough with to like talk about it extensively, but I can like guide you through it if you want to get some clue of it. So here are some questions about Resolve then. Why DaVinci over Adobe? What would be your top 5 reasons to switch from Adobe Premiere? One program would be my number one. Render times would be another. Just like working with ProRes or DNHQ, whatever it's called on PC, those formats and relying on those makes it more stable. If you mix it up, then it becomes pretty much the same. But as long as you keep to those like favorable formats, then it does a fantastic job with render times. I had an MXF file from a live Q&A way back on the C300, and in Resolve that took like probably 4 hours to export. in ProRes 444, which was higher resolution and everything, took 15 minutes. It's just insane. And then another thing is like the whole media management. I just like how they just take any format. After Effects has been pretty good at that, but Premiere has always had some issues, I feel. And I also feel like it's too cumbersome, the program in itself. There's so much, like, it gets so cluttery, and there's so many windows that you can, like, I can put this window there and I can put this there. It just distracts you from actually working. The color panel is the best. You can't even compare. If you worked in Lumetri, you don't know how to color, you don't know what color grading is, it would be my opinion. And somebody will probably get offended by that, but it's just not how professional people color. You don't color by doing like adjustment layers and that sort of thing. You go in independently on every image, and you go in and you light every image, and it's a totally different process. So if you're interested in color grading as a profession, Premiere is just not going to cut it, or any Adobe program will cut it. I think that was 4. What else? Like in the new version, I love the ease of use when it comes to the additional dialogue replacement thing that they have. You can just go in and you can just go in and have, let me just show you where it is. You just go into the Fairlight panel and you have ADR. And then here you just like, okay, so let's say I have this part here. I want to create a new cue. And I want to record a voiceover where I'm saying, hey, I'm recording. Then that thing will just like be mapped to whatever the timeline is or whatever. Then you would go in and you would just use this whole panel to record the voiceover, which I would do in my like sound booth. And then I have like a link cable with HDMI in there, so I can see the screen and I can get it timed, and like, yeah, it's a nice feature, which you usually have to go into a second program to do. And I think a lot of stuff, like just because they focus on getting one program to have it all, that starts to work now. I feel like this version is definitely the best one that they've had so far. So I just see like, okay, so if you compare it, if you look at Google Trends, I think Premiere is about 10 times as big, or at least, 10 times, I think, as big of a program in terms of search. But Premiere's curve is looking like this. DaVinci Resolve's curve is looking like that. People are understanding that this is a tool, and I think that the more as this thing progresses, in a couple of versions, this will be the new standard, I feel. Just like Premiere, Final Cut. Final Cut will probably go away, I feel. And then like Avid, if they don't go bankrupt like they seem to be all the time. I think those are like my favorite things, but it's also that they've taken a lot of Final Cut's best things, but Premiere has done the same. Everybody steals from each other. I mean, as an edit, NLE thing, it's pretty similar. It's not that different. I mean, you could like do the same things in all these programs in terms of an editor. Anything is possible in all of them. Final Cut has had bad support for formats, but it's been a pretty good and speedy thing to do or edit in, as long as you don't do features. I did Pearl of Africa in Final Cut 10. I'll never do it again. That's why I switched as well. It took like an hour to open the project in the end. So don't do it. Do short projects. In Final Cut 10, that's fine. Let's see. Can you tell me something about freelancing and editing in DaVinci Resolve? Yeah, for me, I've done that. I think that, like, for the most part, I think that people are so open to you editing in your format or in your NLE. There can be issues if you have a director that does like pre-work, like the rough cut or something like that. Now I direct most of the stuff that I do, but I do edit to other people sometimes. And when you do that, then it can become a problem if you can't ingest whatever you're getting. So the biggest problem is, and the only problem I think, because it has support for Premiere and Final Cut flawlessly. But if you come from Avid, then there is an issue. Not if you have the newest Avid, because then you can also get in. That's a really good thing with Resolve, that you can actually get into the program very easily. It has support for most things. But the older Avids, which some people do still edit on, they don't support the formats that you can export that then get into Resolve with all the all the stuff that they've put on. So that can be an issue. But otherwise, like, a lot of editors don't even have their own systems. So I think if you're freelancing, I think you should know all the programs. I don't think that you should feel like it's like a big thing to go over to Premiere or Final Cut. I could go back and forth easily and it doesn't affect what I'm doing. But if I can pick one, I would pick Resolve. But I do edit in all of them, and it's just depending on the project. Do you write a script for your documentary? Not really. I do a lot of research. I reevaluate what I'm doing. I'm writing like outlines all the time and scene lists, and I try to like map out the dramaturgy and the story as much as I can, and what scenes do I need, and what turning points, those things. But I don't usually write a script. I cut the script. Usually the rough cut is the first writing of the script. Before that, I don't really have a clue what the end product will be. It's kind of hard to know. You need to know some parts to be able to pitch it. That's how much I know. I know enough to pitch it and to sell the thing. Okay, so on to a little bit about like the whole edit panel and what's new. You have the sound library, which I really love. Unfortunately, they don't support all formats, so some of my effects I couldn't get in here, which I think is a bit annoying. But other than that, just like you being able to search while you edit or you sound design, and you just search for drive and you get those audio, and then you just like put the ins and outs, and then you just drag it on to the whatever track you're gonna have it. I just love that simplicity, and that's what I try to get out of a program. I want a speedy workflow. So I love that about one of the new things. Another thing that's new is these panels between timelines. I don't use that so often. I think that also slows down the system. So as much as I can, I would close and just have one. But it is good to kind of be able to do it at least. But I think the more you have open, the more heavy it's going to be on the system. Do you sell your excess studio licenses? I should look into because I have a couple of them which I don't use. I should look into how you do that. I should probably sell, maybe even have a competition for all you guys, and somebody can win one. That's probably a better idea. Let me think about it and how we would do it. I'll get a wheel in here and just spin it and have a couple of people that are with maybe images or something. I don't know, but it has to be analog, I feel, so we can't trick the system. Yeah, on to the next thing. Let me see, what else? Like, this is a minor thing, but because you have a grading tool within Resolve, when you have the grade on, it becomes heavy, obviously. You have to render everything. But then there's a little button up here that I can show you, which is basically this little button. You can just push it, and it mutes the effects or bypasses them. That's a great feature. And I just love that, like, the simplicity of those things. You just want that to be able to turn it off and go back to editing. That's why I want it in one program. Just like one button, okay, I backtrack, now I'm back editing. You shouldn't be able, or you shouldn't have to be like forced to be in grading or in online. Online is the stage after you lock the edit. You go to online where you do all the effects and you do all the grading and you do all the sound mixing. You shouldn't have those as like separate or locked things. That's just like not necessary today. What else do I like about the editor that's new? It's not that much. Subtitles is new. which is kind of weird that it took so long, but I just like the implementation of the subtitles, because you just, if you have the subtitles here, oops, there we go, and let's just drag some video here, you can actually just by having more than one of these, let me just show you. So now we have two of them. You can just like, okay, you can mark all of them and change all of them, or you can just like go into one and go to the track style and like change that independently. But if you mark all of them and go to the track style, you can change all at once, and I really like that simplicity as well. That's the thing that I enjoy. Like that whole subtitle thing made me happy inside, which is weird, but yeah. I'm kind of dying to have your aesthetic. I've always admired the color and matte look of your footage. Thank you. It comes down to the grading most of the time, or but also like it comes down to a little bit. Comes down to knowing how to work the material. Where is the mouse? Here we go. It comes down to a little bit of how to work the material as well, because you need to shoot in a certain way or not overexpose. I underexpose rather than overexpose. Those things to keep the information as well. But other than that, it's a lot of grading involved. Is there a way to go back in time? Just joined. I think you can scrub back, Lucas. I think you can. Can you set up smart bins to always show up when you start a new project? That's what I did. So I set this whole project up today. And this is funny because this feature has been here forever, and I've worked with an editor for a while, and we've been sending stuff across each other. And he knows this because he had like cleaned out projects when he sent them to me, but he didn't tell me, and now I figured it out myself. But you can actually switch the programs. So if you go into, this is like the first thing you see when you get into the program. You can actually like right click here and you can do like dynamic project switching. And then you can go into different projects. And the reason why you have that process is because they don't want you to have several projects open because it eats up the system. So instead you have to activate it to open two projects at the same time, where you can copy paste in between them. So what I wanted to do today was kind of evolve that into like, okay, so I'm making a template that can be like what I use as the starting ground for every project. So now I've made this whole thing, which is basically just like the whole organizational aspect of every project. Having like the right bins, having things be in the right place. Another thing that I want to talk about is how to speed up the workflow. And this is like my go-to thing is all the material that I get in a project. Sometimes you convert all of it to optimize media to speed up the process, especially if you're going to sit with a client. You want to have it speedy as, a rabbit running on a field from a lion. But this program ain't that if you mix all the formats and everything. You have to go about it in a smarter way, because when you start to mix the formats and it's high res, you need speedy drives for the program to work really well. But you can also do this smart thing, which like this is what I've worked out. There's probably tons of ways of speeding things up, but let's say you have all these videos that are being used in this. Okay, so I would make one that like takes out all the footage that is in the whole project. And then I would just like select all of those. I would right click and then you need to see this. Let's see. We need to have this usage thing clicked in. And then we select all of these. And then when you right click, you can update usage. So then this one will say like, okay, the usage is 1, blah, 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 how many times it's being used. And then I've added a whole thing here, which we can just open. So anything that doesn't have optimized media and the usage is greater than 2, so it's being used, all those will end up here. So of all the files, like this is all the media. Sorry, let me backtrack so you can see what I'm doing here. Forgot to mix. Okay, so once again, here's the usage. So I added this little thing here, usage. Then you can just select all of these, update usage. That will be just updated across the whole project. You then make a new smart bin where you can have like, okay, all optimized media that's missing, so it doesn't have it. All the usage is greater than 0, so there is, it's being used. Then those will end up here. So you get all these. So from like all media, you get those selected in this one. Then you would just take all of these and you would just generate optimized media of those, which are the files that you're using. So you don't have to convert everything. And then you would set up this in the settings to be like optimized media resolution half, and then like the optimized media format being like ProRes proxy. So you have like a speedy render process and a low-res version of everything. That's how I would do the whole process. And having all this set up beforehand, and also the sound mixing. So I've done all the sound mixing in this whole thing. So these are the labs or the voiceovers or all the dialogue. All of them are here on mono tracks. And then you have FX tracks. And then you have atmospheric tracks. And then you have music tracks. And if you go into the sound mixer, you have all of these. And then we can look at the whole mixer. So then I've added like compressors certain for a certain mic. So for voiceovers, this type of compressor. For labs, this type of compressor. And then you have these EQs, which is like for making it less muffled and less like a bit more crisp sounding. And then like all the levels and whatever. And then on the audio, I would go into the EQ and I would take down around 1K to get, because that's where the dialogue usually lives, just to take that out. All that stuff I made in the template, and then I just use this template to begin with in every project. So that's how you can speed the whole process up. So you just start with this, then you start implementing all the media and all that stuff. If you want something from a different project, you can go in and go to this project switching place over here, and you can, activate dynamic project switching, open a different project, and then just copy whatever timeline you would want from that one into the new one, which has the template. That's how I would like speed the whole process up. Hopefully you stayed with me there. Yeah. So let's see. I first started to edit in Avid. When I was at SVT, I learned the basics, but did not like the view of the workspace in the program, so I switched to Premiere. Yeah, Avid is like, it's the selling point is that it actually works when you do big ass projects. That's the biggest reason for people using those. And I think a lot of people, they might not understand it until they like sit with these big, heavy, like 90-minute projects or whatever it is. Then it becomes, as soon as I went over like 40 minutes in Final Cut 10, it just died. So the more stuff you have in the project, I think Resolve did that after I had done vlogging for like over a year in the same project. It still worked, and then eventually it found like, okay, now I have too much stuff. And that was like, it was so much material. Like imagine just doing like vlogging, shooting all the time. It was so much material. And then I can understand it. It was like many timelines, and it was a couple of like probably like 8-10 hours of timelines or something. So that's an issue. When you do longer projects, you don't want to work in a Final Cut. No. Premiere, I know a lot of people that do edit features and everything in Premiere, so I'm thinking that it must be more stable when you go up. But I've only made like up to 30 minutes in Premiere, so I can't say in terms of that, but somebody probably has here, right? I just added the Pearl of Africa to see it. Oh, Benjamin, good. Can you use a MIDI controller for Resolve? Yes. And you can use these as well. Wonder what happens if I unplug it. I mean, you don't have to have one of these, but this is the micro panel. When you have the wheels, it's so much easier to do all the adjustments. I would like that they actually map this differently for editing as well. Like these jog dials would be nice, but this is just for the grading. But it makes it much easier, especially these. Like the balls are the big thing here. The other stuff I could probably live without, but the balls, the precision is so much bigger when you're trying to nail a certain color, and you just can like focus on the screen and just like push the balls. Good thing. Duke, Denver Film, I love working in Resolve. Good stuff. Have you used Basslight? If yes, then how is it different? I haven't used it, but I've been in grading suites as a director or DOP working with a colorist that's used the Basslight, and it's kind of similar. It's not that big of a difference, but those panels are so much bigger, so it's just like a more intense situation where you have like a big mixer board type of thing. So it's just like a bigger type of suite. It's not so different in terms of like screens and stuff to what I have, but it's just all this desk space is basically just like dials and stuff. How to use the paint mode as a map, or do you have to use paint map node instead? I'm guessing you mean in Fusion, because you can go into Fusion. Let me just switch, and you can, if you want to go into Fusion, let me just like tell you what it is. Fusion is basically the After Effects component of the whole Resolve experience, and usually like before this update you couldn't do any like motion graphics or anything seriously. Now all that and the VFX part of it is in the Fusion. So Resolve is like, this is a regular NLE, but if you go into Fusion and you go into the color section, you're gonna see that they have nodes instead of layers. Like the regular edit panel, it has like regular tracks and layers type of feel, but Fusion and color don't have that. It has these node structures which you can link in a very advanced way. So instead, like you have up here, you have the little things that you can change. You have a little bit more on color, but you don't have much. So instead, you would like go and use these effect libraries. You would go into tools, and there you have paint. And if I would add paint to this one, for instance, you just drag it down, and then we get the paint. And then you have, this is the clone tool, right? I think, yeah. So clone tool, and then clone multi-stroke. I'm just gonna show you, and you'll see brush controls, size. Okay, so let me just see. Oops. There we go. Then we would just go in and we would just paint that away. Now this is super sloppy, but you get the point. And then you would just, oops. Thought I did the duration here. Did I do the right one? Multi-stroke, clone multi-stroke. Stroke duration. Okay, there we go. No? Okay, I'm doing something wrong here. But just to show you, the point of all this is just to go in, paint something away, and you would have it automated, and you would be able to just paint like logos away and all those things with the paint tool. And the paint tool has a lot of different like options, so it's like super easy to use and all that. Unfortunately, I haven't used it enough. I've only used the smear thing so far, but I know that there is it on, I think Casey Farris maybe did a tutorial on how he in a live stream messed up as badly as me and didn't know how to make the stroke more than one frame or whatever. So check his out. Sorry for that. But anyway, hi, can I use VST plugins in Resolve? How are these plugins to work with audio? Yes, you can. Carlos, you can use VST plugins for anything. you have both in here, you have the effects library, and then in the effects library you have Fairlight effects, AU effects, and you can have like open effects as well, which usually is like if you have film convert, some people might have that would end up in the open effects bin. And then you would in the Fairlight menu, and you use the effects, you would get the VST plugins here. So you have these, and you could have like Isotope, the Isotope RX series, those types of plugins, all that you can put in here. I have that package. I haven't felt the need for it since they updated, which is pretty damn sweet. But that one, in terms of noise reduction, is much better, I feel, than this one. But still, I mean, it's good enough for most people, I feel. Please also tell about freelance work for a colorist using DaVinci. I want to get into that. I think that's actually like a big underestimated market as a filmmaker, because there's not a lot of people that are like freelancing in Resolve and that are super talented. I think there's a huge underserving of those people, because when you go into like professional work, you're used to going to these expensive suites where you rent a suite for like tons of money, and you have this setup and all that, but people don't need that today. You need it in terms of having the client there, and probably on the online meetings or whatever with your client, you might want to rent a place like that, but for the most part, you don't want to pay for that. You want to be in an environment where somebody like this has a setup that's good enough that you can sit in and save some money to do whatever, make another film or whatever it can be. So if you can invest in that and have your own suite, I think that's a big part of like the future, because grading it's a lot of time that you have to spend on that if you want to make it look good. Do you use double screen mode? Yes, I do. I haven't found a bug. He talks about a bug in the 15 beta. I don't feel like there's any bug in terms of the screen, but I use 2 screens. There might be like if you have more than one. Now I use one just so you can see the stuff, but usually the rest is over here. Now OBS is over here. So that's how I set it up, and then I have the Blackmagic Ultra Studio Express, which then feeds a 10-bit signal to the big screen here. Yeah, that's like a basic setup. You need a video out type of thing to be able to do that. I would like to get a license for low light project just to get some noise reduction as I shoot with the pocket on my fastest lens 2.6. Like the noise reduction is probably one of the like most crucial part of my workflow. So if I would go into color, for instance, and let's just put some power grade on. A power grade is basically, let me just show you here. You have a LUT browser where you could go in and you could have like a LUT put on, but then the way that Resolve works, it's that every grade that you do, you get a power grade. So let's say we would take this shot. Now this is graded already, so it's gonna look pretty hideous, but just to show you like a node structure. So this could be like the way a node structure would look. This first thing would probably be like noise reduction. Then I would add like saturation. I would add white balance. I would add like some light or whatever. Let's just remove those for this. And then I would like sharpen it, and then you would have the look, whatever that is, and then I would add grain, and then I would do like final touching of whatever. Now I'm missing this screen again. Let me switch for you. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about here. Sorry. Noise reduction, saturation, white balance, sharpening, look, grain, final. Which is basically just like how the nodes would look. So if I just deselect all these, and then you would have like noise reduction, which we were talking about. The whole noise reduction is super effective in this one. Additional thing in Resolve is this little dot over here which shows you what changes have been made. So you get that in whatever you change in a panel or in a node. So this is the noise reduction. You would usually, like, the standard way is this. I would just unlock these and I would probably go like 20 in the chroma field and like 3 or 2 or something in the luma. And that cleanup process I would do on everything. Every shot I ever do, I would do it. Some shots are grainy, you have to do more. You have to do up to like 6 or 7. And then eventually I would add grain to make it look more natural, just to like blend the whole thing in. And then the rest is just a whole grade. But that's how the noise reduction would be implemented. You would do the cleanup and then you would have to go in and do some adding of grain to make it look more organic. And I just love that. It's quicker, I feel, when you do it in the faster mode. I rarely use the different modes that you have here. You have enhanced and better, and they are better, but they're also much slower. So it depends on what you're after. But the color panel is just like, it's pretty intimidating to get into. I mean, when you start out and you see all these, like this first thing here is the raw implementation. How does it look at the raw files? What type of settings can you have for those? This is just for color balancing. If you have one of the X-Right, these things. Do you even see it? Let me show you. So confusing with the screens. Here we go. So you have a color checker from X-Right as well. And that one you can use with this one. So if you would go in, you would have like a card that you hold up. You could just go in and have that be color balanced right away. But then Resolve does an amazing job with either auto color balancing or just picking the black or the white points as well. So amazing part of the program is that it's so quick to color balance. And then you just go on and you have like, okay, RGB Mixer, you have the noise reduction, you have the curves, which are like many different curves. You have just regular curves, you have these hue versus hue. So let's say we want to go in and we want to affect only the blues. So you could go in and you can affect only the blues. Why is never things changing? It's too desaturated. Let's see. Now let's actually do it like this. So blues. Why am I not seeing anything? Am I on the right thing? Should be. Okay, let me show you on this one then so you see. Because this has a lot of blue. So if we would just change those values, you would get it to change. I would hope. But it's not. What are you doing? Is it because of the render cache? Ha! I know why it's like that. Because I have deactivated the whole thing. Noob. Okay, so we're back on track. This is how you would affect like all those. So I use the curves a lot. I think they're like a fantastic way of color grading. They're so precise. So if you would want everything to be a certain color, you could do that. Or if you would like to like desaturate certain things, like all the shadows, then you could go in and you could do that. It's just super effective to kind of control like small details in the program. And yeah, then you have like the qualifier, which basically is just like selecting a certain part and keying that, but in terms of like keying it to be able to affect it. So you would get a key like that when you press that one. And then you could just affect that if you wanted, with whatever settings you would like to go into. So you could go and do something crazy like that. And then you have the masks, which is a huge part of it. You can just do a mask of something, and then you could track that. So you could track me while I walk and have the mask follow, or my face in a situation. There's tons of like simple things. The tracker is like super quick. Like pro tip in terms of the tracker, deactivate things. Like deactivate this, the coloring, when you do it. Otherwise it's gonna be slower. Yeah, and you have blur and all that. So color panel is like super advanced, and then you have like the whole scopes and everything, and it's just like a different way of grading. And you could, if you wanted, and you shouldn't, but you could go in and select a timeline thing, and you could add a node here, and you could do effects just like you would in an adjustment layer of a whole thing as well. But yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would be in a different program then. Yeah, Jerry AT, yeah, the noise reduction is built in, but it's only in the studio version. So it's not in all of the free version is free, and the other one I think is $300, the studio version. I would buy the studio version because you have all different types of things that I don't think you can do film grain in the regular version. I don't think you could do interlacing in the free version. But it's not a subscription thing like Adobe. Let me see. Took me a lot of time to understand. Okay, I totally agree with you. It took me a lot of time to understand the program. I want to learn DaVinci Resolve 15. Yeah, it's an amazing program, and I think the whole advanced thing, if you do YouTube, I think it's the perfect tool for you, because you can do everything as advanced as Hollywood, but you can also do like the basic stuff. So you don't have to know the whole program in the beginning. You could just do a lot if you wanted. Like you could do this thing in the timeline here. You could just add a node here, like so, and then you could go into the LUT browser. You could pick a LUT, and you could put that on, and then you would have that of the whole thing. That's how you would do it in Lumetri or in an adjustment layer in Premiere, for instance. And I don't think you should do that, but that is a possibility. If you want to like just get into the editing, start learning one thing, then do that. Like it's possible. We're also updating our course for DaVinci Resolve 15. So if you bought that course, then we're just going to update it very soon. We're going to update with like, I guess everything switches to 15. We might keep some things from 14 because it was good, but other than that, it's going to be like remade. Michael, hey, new to the channel, really enjoy the content so far. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for sticking around. I wish DaVinci had adjustment layers like Premiere. Yeah, no, I just said that. Transitions, like transitions in terms of what I think people are talking about is the stuff that I pretty much like feel is such a gimmick, and I don't like the type of transitions that are being made a lot of the time on YouTube and all that. Now there is like some form of transition type of thing that I did in the video that's coming out this week. So I mean, you can do transitions. It's just a different way of doing it. You can do anything that you can do in After Effects. You can do in Resolve. Everything. It's just a matter of learning it. But it is an intimidating thing to get into Fusion, for instance. But Fusion is more advanced than After Effects, in my opinion. Fusion was, just as DaVinci was the #1 coloring thing for Hollywood, Fusion was also that, a separate program. They did bunch that together. The editing, I don't know where it comes from, but the Fusion and the color things and the Fairlight, all of those were standalone programs that was professionally used. They were like big mixer boards for the Fairlight thing. Like if you know about Pro Tools and that sort of thing, that's how Fairlight was. It's just like a Basslight or DaVinci Resolve for audio. So everything is possible in the program. It's just a matter of like learning it. I think Fusion is intimidating, and I don't feel like I have the time to learn the ins and outs of it. I know the ins and outs of the edit and the color and the Fairlight panel, and that, like, it's sufficient for doing docs. But eventually, because it's there, the Fusion part, I'm gonna learn it, just because I want to do graphics or something. So amazing tool, I feel, because you have everything, but you don't need to learn everything. I just realized as I'm watching that if you have your preferences set to auto for GPU processing, it's much quicker than having the Cura selected manually. Yeah, it totally depends on like your system and everything. You need to try it out. There's like a performance mode in the whole thing, and I feel like I don't want to use that one. I don't know about your experience with it, but the performance mode, I feel like it just stops pretty much when it comes to some mix with the graphics or Fusion graphics. It doesn't work, and when you uncheck it, it works. So it's pretty weird. So I'd rather render the stuff that forces you to stop than have that to be an issue. Okay. Let's see. What do you think about the Blackmagic cameras? Have you ever used one in your own productions? This is a Blackmagic cinema camera MFT. That's SDI into the computer. I have the Ursa. I love the Ursa. I switched the C300 Mark II for the Ursa. I have a pocket cinema camera. I'm probably getting the 4K pocket camera soon. I have had the micro cinema camera. I've had so many different types of cameras, but I'm just fond of Blackmagic because the ecosystem, when you use everything, works so well. But I mean, I've worked on so many different stuff, like Sony's, Canon. All those are like, all cameras are good. It's just a personal preference. I felt like the C300 was too bulky and too plasticky, and like the monitor was making sounds and squeaky sounds into the microphone, and the autofocus was too loud, and like those things annoy me. So it depends. Everybody has a different preference. Somebody's gonna say that the C300 has the best autofocus in the world, and I would just like, seriously. So yeah, any camera works. No, 15 is not in beta anymore. Let's see. Can you do some examples of what the Luma versus Sat curve that you do in every grade, like doing some monochrome, sepia like? Yeah, let's just switch into this, like reset this whole thing. So like the whole curves, just checking so that I have the right screen on. Curves, like you have regular curves, like a contrast curve would be pretty easy to set, for instance. So something like that. But then you have the hue versus hue, which is basically, hue is color. So if you want to affect a color, tweak a color, you would go into the hue versus hue. So change a color to a different color is what it means. So you would just go in and change the blues to whatever that is. And then you have the hue versus sat, which would be like whatever you want to desaturate. So if you have a mixed shot with like, okay, one color in a face of somebody and then another in the background or whatever it is. Like for instance, this shot with me, this is pretty red. So let's just open that shot and show you. Here we go. This is what it looks like without the grade. Oops, let me just get the screen as well. Here we go. So without and with the grade. And if we just clean this up a bit, it's so annoying when you don't have screen real estate. So let me just run through how this is like set up. Okay, so you get the noise reduction, you get the saturation. So add saturation, then do the white balancing. And the white balancing usually is just this part here, color wheels. You could just push the auto button and you get a decent job most of the time. And then here you have just setting the contrast, like pushing up the midtones a little bit. And then you have like a contrast curve, which is just like a regular simple S curve. And then you have the light, which is basically focusing in on like me, lightening me up. And then you have sharpening, the look, and then you have some glow, some grain, and some final touches to like set the look. And here in the final node, you can just go in and see how it's desaturated a bit of the reds. So you could do this just on me, or you could do it just on the background. So if you wanted to, you could go into this light node, for instance, which is just on my face, and you could add some saturation in just the reds and the oranges. Oops, wrong one. This one. So you could just add that to get a little bit more orange there, but not have so much in the background. That would be one way of doing it, just to kind of tweak that. And then you could also change this to a different color if you wanted, just by separating with masks. That's how you could use them. Yeah. Is the noise? Yeah, I answered that. Fairlight was the first digital audio computer, a room-sized, built in Australia. The company built smaller systems since the 80s. Blackmagic bought the company and now sells software and hardware. You see, there's info. Blackmagic got no usable autofocus. Kind of true, but the thing is, there's a way, if you want to. I don't have the camera here. Where did I put it? Didn't I have the camera? No? Okay. Yes, I do. Okay, so let's see. Switch. So this one, this is the pocket camera, the regular 2K whatever. The way that all vloggers and all Instagram, especially Instagram photographers, has done this is a pro tip. This works flawlessly if you do selfie vlogging type of things. You just put the camera like this, you put your hand out like so, and then you press the focus button. This distance is perfect, it's reliable. Once you have that focused, you do the selfie, it's perfect, you don't have to think about it, you don't need autofocus, which just like my GH5 for instance, just bounces around all the time. I want it to be like that I need to think and be the one controlling it. I don't want the autofocus to control me. Just a side note. Do I use a photometer? Benjamin Cortez asks. No. I did in film school. I shot on 16mm in film school, and I shot a lot of analog still cameras as well, and like I'm used to that, but I think it's useless today. You have false color, which is superior to that, I feel. It's just not worth it for me. I think that you see everything. If you learn the whole digital process of image making, then I mean you understand all the things that you're watching out for, especially if you have false color, which is amazing, I think. Let's see. Playback of H.264 4K clips are kind of slow in Resolve. No, then it's probably your drive or it's your system. Like this one is 4K. It has 0 issues to play it. Let me just show the proof. Proof is in the pudding, right? And it has graphics on. It's just like depending on system, depending on what drives you have. Drives, I would say, is crucial. You have to have super fast drives. I would go with like a RAID if you can, otherwise at least an SSD to work from. So if you go into the settings, master setting, and then when you choose this cache locations, for instance, you should choose that as the working folder, like an SSD or a RAID. And then you also have in the preferences as well, you have the media storage, where I would also choose a RAID and all that. That makes it much quicker, but it's also about like RAM and GPU. GPU is a massive thing, so if you can have a eGPU or a beefy system, then that's gonna save you a lot of headaches. Yeah, let me just show you how you should set up the program, just to get a little bit of info on that, because you don't have so much in this, but you have this, you go in here and then you have the preferences. So you have the user section where you actually should set up your save. Live save means that it saves all the time. Project backups means that it backs up in the background and does like segments of your workflow, so you can go back to that and you choose where that should be. That's a good thing to have. I don't think there's so much that you have to go through, but keyboard I feel is kind of smart to just mention. There's 3 keyboard shortcuts that I would add if I could pick, and all of those are in the trim section. So one of them is split clip. This one I've mapped it to F3, and then ripple, which would be this one, ripple end to playhead, and ripple start to playhead, F1, F2. I would map those as well, just because those are so freaking fast. So let's go into the other template one, which doesn't matter if I mess up. So this is just like it is in Premiere. You would just push F2 or whatever, and you would trim and move everything towards like everything that's on the right. Let me just show you. If we split this one, F3, and then we would just like, okay, all this we want to move, F2, and then all that moves and everything moves with it. Another thing that I would definitely do in the settings, because this messes you up. I don't know why this happens to me all the time, but somehow in the timeline thing, there's something called auto track selector, right? No, yeah, I think it's this one. Yeah, I removed all shortcuts for these, because what happens when you have those is that you're working right super quick, and then all of a sudden these gets deactivated. And what happens when they get deactivated is if you go in and you cut something here, so let's say we do like F3 and then we want to cut this, then everything moves but that layer or track. So that would suck if you do that for an hour and everything is out of sync. That would mess your life up. So good to have the backups going, and good to know that you shouldn't have that shortcut going. Okay. So what else? How do you handle exposure in grading if it's over underexposed? This is good to have a look at. Let me see if I can get some media in. Let's see. Okay, so let me just show you this, because this is kind of clever, I think. This is the media storage browser. So you have different media browsers. This is the one that is for the project, and this is the one that's for the system. So a good thing about this is like you can go into a file like these. These are like GH5 files, but you can go into a file like this that's in like the system browser, and then you can actually pick like, okay, so I want this clip from here. So you set an in point with I, and then I want it to, yeah, done, out. Now you could do, like, you could get the whole clip in, but if you just want to have this in, then you just drag that in to the media, and it's going to create a shorter clip, which is like a sub clip of that, which I feel is like a really good way of doing it. Let me just do that all over. In, out. Why isn't it setting that? Okay, let's just do it here then. In, out, and drag it in. You get a sub clip of that, which is just that part of it. And then you would go into the edit and just drag that down or whatever, and then we can just grade the whole thing. So just have a look at the color and then see how we would handle the exposure here. So first thing you would do if you want to set like the exposure is like, okay, so you need to identify where the darkest point is. So you can hover over with this here and see like what type of values that this have. So you usually want to find like the lowest values that you can find. Here we have like R is 032, so it means that it's it's pretty much the darkest that we're gonna find. You click that and it gets mapped to that area, so that's going to be the darkest part, and then this is the highest or the lightest part, and then that's going to be mapped to that. And that's just like the first step of it all. So then from that you can go into the curves, and there's a couple of ways that you can adjust this, but you should have a look at this parade scopes over here, where this up here is clipped and this is like the darkest part. I usually want to bring up the darks a little bit, and then I use this high soft to soften the highlights a little bit. You can also use this to kind of push up the blacks in whatever fashion you want to do. And you can do that here as well. It would be the same thing. But then in this step I would usually just try to keep the control over everything. So I wouldn't do like all the contrast setting at this point. But that's basically how I would kind of play around with it. And if the shot would have like more overexposure, like this one for instance, here we go. Then this one would be, oops, that was the same one, right? No. This one would be a little bit different, but same. But it would, because this is the highest value that you're gonna get. So let's just do something quick, that one, and then we have this one. So there you have like it being, okay, the high point is mapped, the black point and the white point is mapped. Okay, get it a little bit brighter and this one a little bit brighter. And then you can control that however you want to do it. I usually want to do this to balance it out first, and then later I would do like a contrast curve, which is basically where I set everything, because it gets too messy if you have it in this one where you're trying to kind of push certain areas up. And then you could also go in and you could add like another one, and you could add a mask to that. You could kind of, okay, select this part. You would feather the whole mask, and then you would go in and use the curve to kind of brighten that up a little bit. Maybe you need to soften the mask a little bit more. And then you could go into the tracker, and you usually, like this could work, but if you want to track, you could either track it like this, or you could do like a point tracker, or you would do it before you do anything. So you would go and make this smaller first, just so that it has less to try to track. Otherwise it might have a little bit more difficult time, and then you would just, I don't know if it works by muting them, let's see. Yeah, it does. So that's so quick to track. And then from that I would just make it bigger. Oops, not that big. Don't mind the hand doing stuff. Focused. Okay, that's just like one way of doing it. And then you would just like play that thing, and you see it tracks it. that's how quick it is, and I think that most people don't understand the difference in like how easy it is to do those things, and that's when it becomes more time consuming because you can do more. Yeah. Okay, so I need to kind of go put my kids to sleep, but let me just find some last thing. Tell me something about the log wheel. The log wheel, I don't use the log. This is the log, this is the color or primary bars, and this is the primaries wheels. I usually use the primaries wheels just because you have these dials here where you can just set the black and the white point. You don't have that in this section. So even though it's similar, it's pretty much the same. I would just use this one because it has different settings. And just to show you, if you would go into this one and you would just reset all this, and we would just push the auto button, and then we would have to, oops, what am I doing? Auto, there we go. It would also map the black and the white point, and it would color balance the thing. So you could do it that quickly as well if you don't feel like you have the skills to kind of do the white balancing. So I just like the simplicity in that, and then we can just like select this one. So I don't know if you were with me here. Auto, and then it does it. So it's just quick. And then you could also, in this one, you could select, for instance, okay, this in the shadows, the white, that's where I want to map the white or the white balance. And then it becomes warmer. Yeah, so that's it. Okay. Gonna see you guys in a video very soon. Tomorrow, I think. But this was just like a quick look at DaVinci Resolve. I didn't have time to do go through everything, but I think I got to some parts of it just to give a glimpse of what it's all about. And I think that like the biggest thing is that it has everything that you will need in a production. And even if you don't know anything of like 50% of the program, if you don't know the fusion section and you don't know how to sound mix, like having those and eventually evolving into knowing those will just speed the thing up. And if you do YouTube, I feel like it's such a relief to have it in one thing, because you don't have time to go and like switch programs. I don't even have that almost when I do commercials. So it's just like a really good thing to have as a YouTuber. Anyway, see you guys, and let me know what's your favorite features in DaVinci Resolve 15, and or what are you using instead of DaVinci Resolve 15. Okay, see you. Bye bye. Stop streaming.